I'm Steve Levin with SL Production Services, working with KWLP doing production and editing and recordings. This is a video to help you with recording and techniques and things like that. And we're going to start with the basics. And this might seem kind of simple, but it's true. Before recording, always drink something. Water is best, but it's good to keep your mouth and throat from being dry. It does help, and it does help eliminate unwanted mouth noises and things like that. And do not chew gum or eat during recordings. It will show up in the recordings, believe me. Be sure and close the door securely before recording in your recording space. Whatever that is, make sure the door is closed. And if you have jangling or noise-making earrings or jewelry, take it off before recording because, again, that will come out in the recording and be a distraction and it won't sound as good. If you hear people laughing or talking loud before or during your recording, just take a minute and politely ask them to tone it down as you're about to record and you can hear them. You won't believe how many times background voices and sounds are heard in voice recordings, and background noises are pretty much impossible to remove once they're recorded. Now, when recording, position yourself where you can see what you're reading clearly and easily without having to move around a lot while you're talking. And if at all possible, don't have a piece of paper in your hand because the crinkling or ruffling of the papers, and believe it or not, you'll hear paper ruffling in the background too, and that's not good. Also be aware of movement in your chair. If you're sitting down while recording, a lot of movement in a chair will also cause all kinds of unwanted noises. Next is microphone technique. When recording, do not do what a lot of pros call eat the mic. That is, put your mouth right up to or on the microphone. This causes your voice to be too loud or what's known as overmodulated, which means too much volume. Not clear, it's distorted, and you'll also hear a lot of unwanted mouth noises or clicks and things like that. Experiment with your mouth distance from the microphone. The least amount of space you should be is about 3 inches away. About 5 to 6 inches is usually pretty safe. Try to have your mouth placement either above or below the end of the microphone. If you speak directly into the end of the microphone, it will cause noises known as pea popping. In other words, like penguin, peanut. You hear that popping? And it can also pick up other unwanted mouth noises and clicking and things like that. Next, you want to do a practice read before you actually hit the record button. It does a couple of things. It gets you familiar with the wording, and if there are words you are not sure how to pronounce, it gives you a chance to practice it before you actually have to stop and start over and things like that. Next thing you want to do is do a test recording to check your levels. It's quite common that I've received recordings where people are so loud that it's impossible to make it sound clean. It's just way, way, way too loud and impossible to clean up. Here's an example of a recording that the level is just way too loud and will never sound good. It's important to make sure that your recording levels are within a certain range so that they can be worked on and adjusted or cleaned up if need be. If they are too loud, like I said, they are not clear and they make your voice sound distorted. And when these kind of recordings are used for drops, segments, or announcements, or commercials, it sounds real bad. And on the other hand, if the levels are too low, and here's an example of that, it's also real bad because when they're raised up to the level where they need to be to sound right, there's almost always a lot of background hiss or noise behind the voice. Now here's an example of recording right about where you want to be. It's not too loud, it's not too soft, kind of right there in the middle, and that can be worked with. There's room at the top or bottom to raise or lower if you need to. Look at the picture of the wave file here, and you'll notice on the right-hand side there are numbers from 0.0 to norm at the top and minus 0.9 on the bottom. A good level is anywhere between 0.4 and 0.5. Again, that's right about in the middle of the screen there with lots of room above and below to make adjustments. Again, for a review of the basics, you just want to make sure you have some liquid on hand, not in front of the electronics, to keep your vocal cords lubricated and make sure that you don't sound all dry and crackly. It's a good practice to do. Do a proofread of whatever it is you're recording ahead of time before you hit the record button. Then when you start recording, record like a line or two, hit the stop button, the space bar, and see where your levels are before proceeding, because you want to make sure when you get into it that you can save it and do what you need to do with it without having to do the whole thing over again. That's frustrating. So there you go. There's some basics, and I think that'll help you out quite a bit.